Yeah, so I just started in January in this position, so I don't have any fun videos yet, unfortunately, but I'm a research biologist. I was hired to do avian predator ecology, so I'm going to talk about some of the projects that are kind of up and coming as we get started. So avian predators, we have a wide variety of predators in North America. So you have your traditional raptor species, as well as other species like ravens and vultures that will also hunt live prey. And so they can be specialists or more opportunistic hunters, specialist being something like an osprey who's going to eat almost exclusively fish, or the opportunistic hunters that are going to eat a wide variety of prey items and just kind of whatever they can what they come around. And a lot of them are also scavengers. So they will go and feed on whatever is easy for them to get to, carrion, trash, stuff like that. French fries for sure. And they can often be found in really high densities at these super abundant food resources. And that can be either natural or man-made. So natural example would be at salmon spawning runs or seabird nesting colonies, or man-made like a commercial fish hatchery or landfills. Agriculture is also another one of those potentially super abundant resources for avian predators. And this becomes an issue for some places when you have lambs that are vulnerable or poultry farms and stuff like that. So there's all of these different avian predators throughout North America, but the first couple projects that we're really getting started have to do with three of these, which are the golden eagle, the common raven, and the crested caracara. So first, the common raven can be found throughout most of the northern hemisphere and in a variety of ecosystems. And they can and do eat just about everything. And I did a whole diet study for my PhD, if you're interested. And that also includes eggs and chicks of other common ravens. And over the past 50 years or so, their populations have really expanded, especially in the West, and in some places up to 7% annually since 1966. And this is primarily because we've facilitated their growth and expansion by putting out all these really great resources that weren't necessarily there. So food resources, perching, nesting, roosting structures that have allowed them to really increase numbers in areas like the Mojave Desert or the sagebrush steppe that normally wouldn't have been able to keep that number alive. And this has been detrimental to a lot of sensitive species. So this map right here shows the breeding ranges of 8 sensitive avian species that fall within the common raven current distribution. And all of these have had have been negatively impacted by increasing raven numbers. And so a lot of them are threatened or endangered. And a lot of this is because they're really good nest predators. They are really good at developing search images, and then will actually go out and seek nests during the breeding season. But the good news is we actually know a lot about ravens at this point. We know they love agriculture. We know that transmission lines and roads, particularly interstate highways, will influence their habitat selection and movements. And landfills are a big deal for them. You probably saw in one of the first pictures, just a ton of ravens at a landfill. Oh, that one too. And they are also they're more commonly found in areas of low human density. And so current research is basically how do we take that information and modify the habitat, reduce food subsidies, and or modify or remove structures in order to get them out of sensitive species habitat or livestock areas. And there's a number of things that are being tested currently. We have nest management, so putting up nesting deterrents, oiling eggs, removing nests, use of effigies. You can see that effigy didn't really do much, unfortunately. But those are kind of some of the ways that we're looking at managing the nests themselves. Food subsidy removal, so burying or composting carcasses, roadkill removal, things like that. And then hazing techniques. Just one of the cooler ones I've seen recently is up here, right here. They were formerly hard shell labs, but I think they've actually changed their name recently. They're using lasers at landfills to haze ravens. And I think they've had some pretty good success with that. So next we're going to talk about bald and golden eagles. And so they're a tricky group to study or to manage because they're protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. And so it's a balance between conservation and managing when there is that human-wildlife conflict. So they're both considered partial migrants, which generally means some of them migrate, some of them don't. Golden eagles prefer medium-sized vertebrates, a lot of jackrabbits, ground squirrels, things like that. Bald eagles will eat a lot of fish, but they're also, you'll find tons of them at landfills. They'll pretty much eat anything. And so golden eagles, despite a lot of conservation efforts, particularly with like lead poisoning, windmill collision, stuff like that, their population is considered stable or slightly declining. Bald eagles, though, they are sort of the crowning achievement of the Endangered Species Act. I think they were down to about 417 breeding pairs within the contiguous US. And they have bounced back tremendously. And I think in 2007, they were taken off the list. And their numbers continue to rise. So the first project that I've actually started is Wyoming with some lamb producers. And in Wyoming, producers have lost approximately $293,000. That was in 2019 due to eagle depredation. And that rose to about $765,000 in 2024. And there's a few reasons why this is an issue. One is we have this temporal overlap between when eagles are migrating, so they're moving to their summer breeding grounds, and that lines up pretty well with lambing season. Spatially, also, Wyoming really falls within these migration corridors, so spatially they overlap as well. And also during this time when we're trying to get lambs out of this vulnerable stage, that's when the eagles are either increasing their caloric intake to produce eggs, or they're bringing a lot more food back to the nest to support their chicks. Bald eagles, there's less data like we have for the losses due to golden eagles. We're seeing a lot more anecdotal evidence of livestock depredation from bald eagles. But the current research, or what we're trying to do, is we're looking at a few key questions. We're looking at demographics, habitat use, and then effectiveness of deterrence. And so as far as demographics go, are we looking more at breeding pairs? Are we looking at juveniles? Are they the migratory birds? Or are they birds that are sort of residents? Is there any way we can key in on specific use? And this kind of comes down to habitat use, right? Do we need to focus on these nesting territories, or do we really need to focus on these birds that are migrating? Or maybe it's both. It's likely both. And the habitat use, that will also help us figure out the best placement and which deterrents to put in those areas to be most effective. And so when we're looking at the types of deterrents, and again in Wyoming, we're looking at a large spatial scale. So we take some of these ideas that we've had success with before and trying to adapt them to a much larger environment. But we're also looking at the time of efficacy. So if we put a deterrent out, how much time goes by before they start to habituate and they basically come back? And so all of that will help us inform the timing and the placement to hopefully give the lambs a chance to become less vulnerable to eagle depredation. And last, I'm going to talk about crested caracara. And so they are found from the southern tip of South America to the southern states, southern United States. And they're non-migratory, and they also, kind of like ravens, will basically eat everything. They're big scavengers and will they're mostly like big open areas, big open grasslands and deserts. So you can imagine kind of the places that they're hunting from there. And their populations are moving north up through Texas, and they're increasing. So you can see these dramatic increases of 29.7%, 44.8%. So in these southern states, Arizona, Oklahoma, Texas, and Louisiana.
How big are these birds?
I don't actually know the size, but I would guess probably about the size of a raven. They're falcons, so they're not as big as an eagle. Okay. And so their increasing numbers and the expanding range has caused issues in agriculture with livestock depredation. But there's another population in the United States, which is in Florida, and their numbers are actually decreasing. So in Texas, they're thinking that a lot of the reasons why they're expanding and increasing populations is because, a lot like ravens, they're able to really utilize all those structures we're putting out there, all those food subsidies. So the more we put out there, the more birds we're able to support. And we're actually seeing the opposite thing in Florida, because they started to see, as human development was getting rid of some of their nesting habitat, then their numbers were decreasing. So that's kind of an interesting thing there, but also a really unique opportunity, because while we're potentially in Texas studying ways to reduce the impact on livestock production and kind of mitigate their numbers, when I was thinking about this, I thought, well, if these birds in Florida can sort of habituate to the increased human presence, their numbers are going to start increasing as well. And so this presents sort of an opportunity to prevent some of that human-wildlife conflict before it even starts, by using some of, hopefully, the information that we get from the Texas populations. So this is interesting too, because it's a twofold management, process, right? Is you want to protect some of the areas while you're also mitigating increasing numbers in other areas, which is what I was saying right here. So that's areas where we need to reduce wildlife conflict. Right here, we need to protect their habitat, but also keep in the back of the mind that if they do start expanding, that we can use the information from Texas to hopefully mitigate that population as well. So as I said, I just started, and my background is primarily with ravens. So I'm learning more about these other avian predators, and I'm not familiar with all of the issues that livestock producers have. So certainly if you guys have any research questions, or if you just want to chat about anything, please give me a call or email me. Like today, I learned about the solar farms and how they're just creating little perches to feed from for our avian predators. So happy to chat and take any questions. Yeah.
We found dead lambs, young lambs, in very nicely fenced pen, and we suspect an avian predator. Are there any telltale signs?
Okay, so are there any telltale signs that a depredation is due to avian predator? If you can get to the carcass quickly, very quickly, yes. You will, there are resources that if you're interested, it's not a full necropsy, but typically you're going to do some scanning to see exactly what you're looking at, what the marks look like. But if it's out there for any extended period of time, you're not going to know if it's scavenging or if it's that the eagle caused the depredation, or the avian predator caused the depredation, because all of the birds I've talked about will take a carcass. They don't have to hunt fresh live prey, even the golden eagles.
I think that actually lost at least one lamb to black vultures. We don't know if previously they were lost to those, because we didn't realize that's what had occurred. But I called the USDA office, and they said that I needed to go out and take a picture of it, and that if there's active bleeding, well, for one thing, they pluck their eyeballs out. First thing they do. And then if there's active bleeding from it, you can take a picture from it and then you can possibly get compensation. But also, this lamb had been disemboweled, And they said that was another indication that was a black vulture. And we have had problems with black vultures. They haven't been as bad this year, but it seems like their numbers are really increasing around our area. And I've spoken with other producers that have had cattle attacked with it when they were calving. They would attack the calf as they were being born.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that they're protected, and I was just wondering if there's any legislation going on with whether or not they're going to change the Migratory Bird Act to exclude the black vultures, since they were causing so much predation in the U.S. Hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of loss.
Where are you based out of?
I'm sorry, what?
Where are you located?
Kentucky.
Kentucky, yeah. So the question was about, I think, amending the Migratory Bird Treaty Act for avian predators that are causing damage. That's U.S. Fish and Wildlife. I have heard working groups specifically with ravens, but if they can do it for one species, I would imagine they can do it for others. So working groups with ravens discussing that possibility, but that's out of my wheelhouse. That's policy. Dustin, you?
Yeah, I'll just add, Lindsay is not being tasked with doing anything with black vultures because our Florida field station, they're doing a lot of research on black vultures because that's just geographically, it makes a lot more sense. So Brian Kluber down there is leading a lot of the efforts there. And Wildlife Services has worked with Fish and Wildlife Service to where you can get permits to be able to remove them. And they're setting it up to where Wildlife Service can get one, I think the way it works is Wildlife Services can get one big permit for the whole state and then sub-permit that out to individual producers when they need to. And so it's streamlining that permit process so that when you need help, you don't have to start doing that whole process and suddenly it's too late by the time you get it. You can just call your local Wildlife Services office and we may be able to get out there right away. Or you may be able to sub-permit off of ours to start doing some of that. So they're real easy to track. They're real easy to do. Like, they're not the smartest birds, luckily. So we have a lot of tools available to us. But yeah, you do have to kind of still work through the process. I would definitely recommend getting in touch with your local Wildlife Services office because they can really help you with that. We do a lot of that.
The thing is that you have to pay the permit like $100, and that's good for like 5 birds. So it's kind of like, I don't know if I should say it's not, but it's kind of a shoot, shovel, and shut up type thing.
Yeah, no, we understand that, and that's where I think working with the local Wildlife Services office may give you more options and flexibility. So.
I'm in Southern Ohio, not far from Tamra, and I've noticed that we're getting a lot more bald eagles, and I'm just wondering if that migratory pattern applies to that part of the United States as well, as far as maybe thinking about not lambing during certain periods of time.
So the question is whether you should consider lambing different periods to avoid the migration, because there's more birds in the area. Certainly if you can. Migration is going to last for a couple months, so I understand why people can't stop or shift too much, but I've had livestock producers shift completely to like January, and so his lambs are out of like the danger zone. I mean, an eagle will take a full-grown ewe, but that's way less common. So that's something that has been done successfully, but I don't know how many people are able to do that.
Okay, would like the fall be?
So there's a fall migration as well. So you would want to, yeah. So they're going to move from their breeding grounds to their wintering grounds. But I mean, it's pretty easy to find those migration timelines. Birds of the World or All About Birds. It's the Cornell Ornithology Lab. They have a lot of that information. But yeah, if you're able to do that, or of course, like ideally everyone could shed lamb, but that's not, realistic for most people. Yes.
It may be helpful in Wyoming, it's pretty common to land in the open range
Finding out there what they are.
Yeah. Yeah, so in the producers that I'm working with are all range lambing. And so that's where taking some of those deterrents and then trying to adapt them for that environment is really tricky, but that's sort of what we're working with and what we're working on, I guess. Yeah.
So my friends and I, we moved to Lambing in January because of that issue. And it was actually originally started as an accident because random, but it was a nice lesson. We do get a lot of hawks, and we've had some of our chickens killed because of it. But by the time that hawks are around, our lambs are like bigger, so they don't cause a problem. But we also we don't range, like, we have a smaller herd, so we can do that easier.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of challenges to having those bigger herds and range lambing. But yeah, it's the migration, I think, and then really, and I don't know this yet know this about the eagles, but with ravens we've seen, which makes sense, right? They've got chicks in a nest. They're going to be hunting, foraging really close to that nest. It's going to grow the older that the chicks get. The older the chicks get, the more food you need. So, not only do you have more birds in the area during migration, but you've got really concentrated foraging. So we might find if we find that breeding pairs are the ones doing the most damage, honestly, that's probably the best case scenario because there's more options. You have a fewer territory. We don't have that many golden eagles in Wyoming. You can really focus the deterrence in these areas versus just we have to protect everywhere. So it's tricky, and it's not every species is different. Every breeding status, migratory status makes it a little bit different. The environment makes it different. So yeah. Yes.
We seem to have a rotation of avian predators between eagles, hawks, ravens. Will one predator displace another?
They certainly can. I think that this kind of comes down more to honestly individual behavior, because I've seen ravens nest right next to a Swainson's hawk or some owls. And ravens don't seem to care too much about the eagles. The eagles don't really care too much about them. I think it's more of a risk reward thing. Ravens are beautiful flyers. It's just not worth the risk, right? And I imagine that goes for the rest of the raptors as well. So I don't think that it really matters as much. But if one gets, let's say one of the pair gets killed, that might be a good time if that territory looks good to come in and take their nest over, because they'll use each other's nests too. Not so much the golden eagles, but other raptors and ravens will reuse each other's nests. So it's usually just, they can come in and they will, but I think they tend to just avoid each other.
Let's take one more question.
Okay.
There any online?
There were some comments, but no questions.
You mentioned that black vultures are not very smart. When I think of a raven, I think of a smarter predator, more like a coyote versus a bear in terms of problem solving and rapid habituation. As you are doing your research, are you finding that intelligence is a challenge, or that you're able to generalize toward all avian predators?
So the question is the intelligence of some of these species I'm working with, particularly ravens, if that presents a challenge when I'm trying to, determine habituation of deterrence for all, or can I expand that to all avian predators? Ravens are so challenging. I spent thousands of hours watching these guys and trying to trap them, and had to come up with a whole new trapping technique, and it was crazy. So there is this individual variation, and they're very intelligent, but you are able to generalize. And I think with the other avian predators, because they have the ability, they have they hunt more, right? They're built for hunting. Then they are easier to generalize, whereas ravens are kind of a jack of all trades. And so the ecology behind them is pretty similar. And so I find that when you're mitigating for one, it's pretty similar to the others. It's mostly like the ecosystem and the predator together, that combination that's a little bit different. But yeah, I guess if it works for a raven, it'll work for anything. That's
Okay, that was
that's
a
the
good
real
research
answer.
on ravens.
I think in terms of intelligence, it's like humans, dolphins, ravens.
Yeah.
something like that.
I just,
They're like right there.
yeah,
There's probably considerable overlap between the smartest raven and the dumbest person.
100%. Yes. Thanks so much.
Before you leave, Lindsay, so we have some wool socks from the Utah Wool Growers.
Oh,
And
thank you.
also here at USU and the St. Croix Association, we're really grateful for you guys to come and give us some of these tools out of your toolbox. And I hope everyone noted down Lindsay's contact as she continues to work, especially those of us from, Kentucky and Pennsylvania and these different places. Reach back out to her, tell her your stories, and then she can give you some insight on how to work with your own state and how to hopefully combat some of these big bird issues. So yeah,
My projects are across the country. So so I'm not just limited to, to Utah or even this general area. So happy to chat about any of that with you. And thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you.
We're based in Utah.
Yeah.